All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Sinful Gaming, and welcome in particular to Mortal Citizens, a Cities of Sigmar podcast. This is a podcast where we talk all things Cities of Sigmar. Today, I'm joined by Dan at 9-inch Charge on Twitters. How are you, mate?
Yeah, really good. Thank you for having me on. Been really excited to talk about Morathi and what's happening to the cities and what's happening in the mortal realms. Really exciting lore, lots to talk about.
Yeah, Broken Realms has certainly shaped up the Mortal Realms in both the narrative and potentially to a competitive standpoint as well. Cities of Sigmar has got some cool things throughout the book, and most importantly today we're going to chat about Misthaven, and the reason for that is, Dan, you are a big fan of Wanderers and Living City, so this is somewhere in your wheelhouse, I guess. It's a similar sort of feeling city to me, so you've got a little bit of a game in this, and I play Dark Elves, so the two of us sort of have, a thing for this city.
Yeah, so I've been exclusively playing Living Cities since the Cities of Sigmar book came out, and now there's a new ambushing army on the block, so I was really keen to check them out.
Yeah, and for me, it's Dark Elves. Everyone who watches the channel knows I'm all Scourge Privateers all day. I mean, this city, like the main character from it, is a Scourge Privateer. So, what's not to like? So, first of all, like Broken Realms, I guess we can talk a little bit about that first. And all in all, what are your thoughts of Broken Realms as an idea, rather than like what's particular in Morathi as the idea of like this big narrative arc book series? What do you think of it?
I love them all. I really like that they're updating the lore. This is one thing about Age of Sigmar that I really enjoy compared to Warhammer Fantasy Battles, where you might when the new battle tome came out for Warhammer Fantasy, you just kind of get updates of the same stories, and when new models came out, there are updates of the same models. But with Age of Sigmar and with stuff like Morathi coming out, it really does change the narrative. I mean, they've blown up a whole city, mate. It's just like it's going bonkers, and it's really exciting. It's like anything can happen, and this is just the first book of that. So really looking forward to seeing what happens around the corner. Really excited about everything that has happened in this book.
Yeah, I think for me, so I was on the precipice of getting back into 40k when Psychic Awakening was starting to wrap up, and like I really liked the idea of the last few Psychic Awakening books, this big narrative arc that updated a lot of armies, especially, I mean, if we're going along the similar lines of potentially at the end of an edition where they just give you this extra stuff or potentially show you where your army's going in the new edition, and all this sort of stuff. I think they're just awesome books and awesome ways to give you that little bit more to finish out an edition, potentially, if that's where we are going, which is heavily speculated is what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, when we were chatting off stream, I think we're both in agreement that we'd like to see a really nice collection of narrative books that we can read and enjoy and sit on our, on our desks and in our shelves. And then at the end of that, we'd like to see a nice big new box and a nice big new edition.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. So I guess, well, first of all, for anyone watching, we are going to be going to spoilers of both lore and all that sort of stuff. So if that's not what you want, stop now and come back when you're done with the narrative, because we're going to get into that first. So, yeah, the big hits on the narrative.
Before we start the narrative, can we just say, before you opened this book, before you started reading it, were you pro Morathi being a goddess or not?
For me, yes. Like, not having played Warhammer Fantasy for a long time, this has always sort of been her goal forever and ever. Thousands of years in the making, this has been for Morathi. She's wanted this ascension of sorts for years, whether in Warhammer Fantasy, ruler of all elf kind, or now in Age of Sigmar as this, like, a god or goddess. It's always been her plan of like utter dominion over her followers.
Yeah, I agree. I was pro Morathi. I think, she survived the old world. The model is a centerpiece on par with anything else in the mortal realms that is a god or a goddess. She created her race of elves correctly the first time, unlike Teclis, who is a god. I think the only con really was that she's an absolute psychopath, and do you really want to unleash that on the realms?
Yeah. I mean, she's a psychopath with a plan. Like, for all her flaws, Morathi is extremely cunning, and she does have a plan whenever she does something. I mean, this is ages in the making, and it really goes to show you like how cunning she is in this whole story. She is a cool character. She is, for me, one of my favorite characters in Age of Sigmar. And you were speaking before about seeing like the narrative grow, but what's also been great about Age of Sigmar is see these characters grow. From like where Morathi was at the start of this, where she's literally just coming back, and we saw the first. I remember that video of Daughters of Cain. Still to date, probably the best teaser trailer they've done. Gloomspike Gitz did come close with Scraggy, but just from that original trailer of her coming out and like I will not be denied, and eventually now what we have for her to potentially ascending godhood.
Okay, shall we jump in?
Yep, so we're going to jump into the lore first, and also hello to everyone jumping in the chat there, El Pedro and Metaphoric Dragon. Nice to see you there. We'll take some questions later on, and we'll probably get chatting to you a bit more when we get into the rules section of that, as we start talking a little bit about that. So, I mean, to start off lore-wise, let's talk about the broad strokes of Broken Realms. Did you like the story, and were you happy with the outcome?
Yeah, really, really good story. Really happy with the outcome. I've been watching the new series of Star Trek on Netflix. Now, bear with me. This will make sense. But at the end of every episode of that, it really leaves you wanting more with like a little bit of a teaser. It almost sort of, this book almost finishes and then goes slightly into where kind of the next book would leave off, which is a really good plan by the writers, because it just leaves you wanting more so much. I mean, do you want to cover kind of the whole thing roughly, where it goes?
Yeah, so we can, I guess, start with the beginning, which is obviously the book is the main character is Morathi. Duh. That's fairly obvious by the name. And so it starts with her finally wanting to achieve her godhood. She's got this plan, which is to go get a bunch of various artifacts from across the mortal realms and some magical substance from the 8 points. In particular, a lantern from the Ardnef that illuminates everything, and Varanite, I believe the name is, which is the realm stone stuff of the 8 points.
Yeah, Varanite is something in the lore that really grabbed me. So yeah, so every realm has its realm stone, and the 8 points, which is kind of in the middle of all the realms and connects them as a hub, that has its own realm stone, which is Varanite, as you said. One thing about Varanite is it is extremely powerful, and it just does kind of mental, mind-boggling, chaotic things. So if you or I were to touch a piece of Varanite, we would just turn into like a gibbering kind of mass of eyeballs or something like that. And when people go and mine it, if it's so volatile, if it touches the rock around it, then the rock around it turns into like massive jaws and swallows up the mining teams like whole. But one thing that it's really good at corroding and disrupting is all of the runes and incantations that Sigmar put on the realm gate that connects the 8 points to Azure. So Archeon is trying to use it to whittle away at those so that he can open up the gates to Azure and invade Sigmar's homeland, basically, is kind of the start of it. And Morathi spies have noticed it, and Morathi instantly says, right, this Varanite is the blood of Cain, so we need it. Obviously, she knows that it isn't, but that's kind of part of the wider narrative, and that's the opening of the lore, which is, I really enjoyed, like, just from the start, the way it set itself out. You've got Azure under threat, you've got Morathi being sneaky already, you've got Archeon on the brink of succeeding, and it's all kind of, it's this like 2 minutes to midnight scenario where anything could happen, and that's the beginning of it.
Yeah, it really does well at putting across the, I guess, importance of Varanite in the whole story arc. And so it obviously starts with Morathi telling Sigmar about this thing. Now, Sigmar doesn't trust her at all. He knows she's up to something when she comes to him. However, he also knows that he can't just let Archaon come on and waltz up into his grill. And so has to do something about it. So sends a whole bunch of storm hosts, like a humongous army, towards them. And so they go fight in the 8 points, trying to remember the name of the area. I forgot the name of the area where they go fight. Either way, they go fight in this giant carcass of what was once this massive god beast, to Archaon's stronghold, sort of mining out this Varanite to use. And it's there that they eventually do, succeed in disrupting Archaon, but Morathi also, at that point, creates a mist of shadow, and instead of destroying the area around the Varanite, ends up taking the Varanite for herself.
The area is called Varanthax's Moor, and I think anybody would forgive you for not remembering that, because that is quite a complicated and unusual name.
I knew it was like Moor or Mouth. I'm like, I can't remember what the actual thing before it is. But anyway, that's not really the most important part to the story of where we want to get to. So anyway, she ends up getting the Varanite, and Sigmar's none the wiser. Because there's this one knight, Lord Arcanum, that sort of sees through Morathi's shadowy, sneaky stuff, but she ends up stabbing them with some poison dagger, and they ended up just paralyzed and don't go back to Azir. They're just paralyzed in the middle of this like Varanthax's Moor. And that becomes a common thing throughout the thing. Morathi knows she can't kill Stormcast throughout the entire book, which is really cool.
Yeah, because they'll just zip home and tell Daddy what's wrong. So you've got to try and paralyze them, or if you kill them, you've got to kill them dead so they don't go back to Azir. Yeah.
And so after that, she gets her prize, the Varanite. And at this point, we also find out that she's stolen an artifact from the Lumineth as well. It doesn't really tell you how she's stolen that. We just find out
from the Ideneth.
Yeah, we know she's got it from the Ideneth. We don't really know the whole story of like how she got it from them. And so from there, we go back to the Realm of Shadow, Ulgu, to Hagnar, where, of course, is her major stronghold. And we get to look at this place called Misthaven.
Which is what we want to talk about today.
Yep. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. We'll go through like the broad strokes, I guess, before we come back to Misthaven. Anyway, the Ideneth at this point have found out that Morathi stolen their thing. They go and try and fight Morathi. A big scrum happens between the Ideneth and the Daughters of Cain, and then in comes Slanesh out of nowhere. And at this same time, Morathi... Whoop,
I'm still here.
All good. At this point, a big scrum sparks out. Morathi goes and ends up taking souls out of Slanesh. She sort of creates this big magical vortex and starts eating all these elven souls out the belly of Slanesh, these powerful elven souls. All your favorite elven characters, they're not coming back because she ate them. Eltharion is the lucky one that escapes beforehand. But there's a but. She goes to eat this last and most powerful of all the souls that she's found, and she stops. She pauses because something in that malicious black heart that she has pauses for this one soul. And in that moment of weakness, she's rend in two by this soul that becomes a giant blazing sword. And she achieves godhood in the end. Spoiler. She finally eats all these souls. She uses the Varanite and she ascends to godhood. However, she ascends as two beings rather than one. Her Morathi Cain, which is now what people would refer to as Little Morathi, and then the Shadow Queen, her dark ambition, the beast inside effectively becomes its own form.
But just as that is taking place, Volturnos, who is the king of the Ideneth. He's found out that Morathi has stolen this artifact, and he wages a war against the daughters of Cain to get it back. And when he goes in to try and stop Morathi, it's too late. But they kind of strike a deal where Morathi says, "Oh, don't worry about it. Here's a load of souls that I took from Slaanesh that I've got extra that you can have." And then they kind of form an alliance. But what was interesting for me about that part of the narrative is I think that really shows Morathi's character, because she doesn't want to reveal her hand to anyone. It turns out that Volturnos is okay with her having the lantern as long as he can get the souls, but she would rather risk a war with an entire race than than start negotiations and let them know what she's up to, but before her plan comes to fruition.
Yeah, and two important things about this whole thing as well is the souls she gives are the firstborn, so they are the souls that Teclis went and killed. They're because it's widely thought before this, we didn't have confirmation that Volturnus was one of the firstborn, like he was literally one of the first souls ever drawn out of Slaanesh, and it turns out that is actually a thing, and that these are his fellow like ancient souls firstborn that Teclis actually got rendered apart. They're the souls that he got back. And the other important thing is, I guess, the speculation on who that sword-wielding spirit is. Everyone has their thoughts on who it is, and I think the obvious answer is it's probably an Aryan, the only person Morathi ever cared about. Because you read all the early elf lore, Morathi actually is like madly in love with an Aryan.
I agree. That's who I thought that it was as well.
Like giant flaming sword, Malarian wielded the sword of Cain. It can't be Tyrion because he's alive. Is the only other person that's ever wielded the sword of Cain. And so yeah, there's that thought, and like that's who it is. But anyway, that all happens. Morathi achieves her godhood. She gets the Ideneth on her side due to sort of, I guess, a mutual hatred of Teclis. Is really what this is all about. Morathi doesn't like him, and the Ideneth really don't like him. Which is interesting because we know there are sects of the Ideneth that actually want to bridge the gap between them and Teclis. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, see how that plays out in the next book.
Yeah, whether or not we get more on that. And then so from there, Morathi goes to Anvilgard. And this is where we get the other new free city, or update to a free city. And so we won't go too much into the, I guess, lore of this one, because it'll be for another time. But effectively, Morathi goes in under a guise of peace, and effectively all the Dark Elves stab everyone in the back and take over Anvilgard. That is the short summary of it.
I think what's significant about this in the lore that we may have skipped over is the storm host that Sigmar sent to help Morathi when he was getting after the Varanite was the Anvils of Heldenhammer, and they are all the ones that are in the Storm Keep in Anvilgard. So by sending them out and Morathi leaving them for the slaughter has significantly weakened the defenses of that city, and that's when she pounces.
Yeah, so that's a major reason why she chooses Anvilgard in the beginning. Not because, I mean, it is a Dark Elf heavy city, but because it has been weakened. Like, she's purposely gone, cool, Sigmar's weakened this city, I can go for this. And
I think she had the plan from the start, because she's in this book, she's always seems to be kind of one step ahead. So she sort of almost brokered a deal with Sigmar where she said, the Anvils of Heldenhammer, the Dark Elves live there and we fought alongside them before, and wouldn't it be great if those are the ones that you chose, Sigmar? And he agrees. Yeah. She's definitely, and that's what's really cool about this. They have an issue where like your one step in front characters somehow get foiled at the end, and it's nice to see them. She literally just succeeds. There's no other way that, like, she has a slight hiccup in her achieving her godhood, but other than that, she utterly succeeds at everything she's trying to do. And she manipulates everyone. It's a really cool story, and it does well at showing you that she does deserve her godhood. That she's done all this stuff that actually
this is like, they show you how powerful, how influential she is, thus showing you, okay, this is why she deserves to be a god. It's not going, oh, it's someone who gets there by the skin of the teeth. No, she just dominates her way towards her godhood.
Okay, so do you want to tell me what the law says about Misthaven?
All right, so I'm gonna read verbatim from it. So Misthaven, the city of scoundrels. The notorious port of Misthaven is one of the strangest of the God King's free cities. Its landmass consists of countless boats and great junker ships lashed together, forming artificial islands whose foundations descend far below the surface of the ocean. Though it is semi-permanently moored on the shores of Cape Tenebrax, the city is not bound to a single location. Due to its unique construction, Misthaven can be unmoored, slipping into the shadows of the penumbral sea. In extremis, the boats that form the great city can detach and disperse as needed, and much like a shoal of glimmerfish scattering before the face of a hungry alapex. Rather than districts, the city is divided into several armadas that make up these different sort of sections that can be taken apart, each commanded by an admiral or fleet master of the Scourge privateers and defended by free-good regiments renowned for their marksmanship as skilled marines. Misthaven is regarded as a hive of criminality, vice, and deception by those from other free cities. Natives of the cities of Scoundrel naturally take great pride in their dubious reputation, dealing in illusory magics and narcotics, and forging business arrangements with all manner of unsavory customers. The city's Grand Conclave is nominally responsible for ensuring the city follows the decrees of Vizier, but it is often in vain in the undertaking. Politics in Misthaven is as deadly as the ever-shifting as the gloomy seas of Ulgu themselves. So it's literally like this floating port city made up of all these different ships sort of like tied together, which is cool.
I have an issue with the name Misthaven. I don't know. For me, when I think of a haven, I don't think of somewhere where dark elves go to do drugs.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's just because I'm a Brit, but like over here in the UK, there's loads of like holiday parks, and they're all called Haven holiday parks. And it for me, like when I think of anything with the word like Misthaven, I kind of think like I might ask someone, "Oh, where did you spend your summer?" They go, "Oh, I went to Misthaven." But actually, this is a city of scoundrels where dark elves go to do drugs, and they're pirates, and they're murdering each other, and they're it's rife with all that sort of stuff. I got to get that out of my head. I think the accent over the A means that it's pronounced Harven.
Yeah, pretty sure it's Harven, but okay. I can't. Yeah. It's going to be like the slack in me of every time. I'm pretty sure it's Misthaven, but I will say Haven every time, and I think everyone just does, unless you're from, I guess, a part of the world that has that in your natural tongue.
If you're like Swedish or something.
Yeah, it's like Scandinavian, like Northern European have that in their sort of like natural sort of tongue. So you're much more likely to actually pronounce it properly, while we're going to butcher that name. But anyway, so that's what we're here to talk about today. Now, we mentioned before that like it is sort of Living City 2.0. Whether or not that's an improvement on Living City, that's up for debate. I think it's different in a way, though, in that it probably favors combat units more than the shooting that Living City wants you to work towards in Living City. But we all know the whole you get Durthu, shoot with Durthu, then charge and kill stuff in combat.
Yeah, I think there's pluses and negatives compared to the Living City with this, but I think we'll get into them later. So shall we go over kind of broadly what it is about? So it's called the City of Scoundrels, and it is from the realm of Ulgu. And the main ability is underhand tactics. So instead of setting up a friendly Misthaven, Order Serpentis, Shadowblade, or Scourge Privateers unit with up to 10 models on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say that it is set up as a flanking force as a reserve unit. And you can set up one unit in a flanking force for each Darkling Coven's, Free Guild, or Dwarden unit you have already set up on the battlefield. And at the end of each of your movement phases, you can set up one or more flanking forces units on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy units. And at the start of the 4th battle round, flanking force units that are set in reserve are destroyed.
Yeah, so that's really cool. So it once again, like I think the major thing these two brand new cities, Harkonnen included in this, is that they really push you towards a narrative feel for the city, and they reward you for playing with units. Whether or not they're like the most powerful cities is irrelevant. They do give you bonuses for playing with a narrative themed army, which is cool. Having an army that you're building that fits in the setting properly and getting rewarded for it is always fun for me.
Yeah, so it's really specific in the units that it says. So the ones that are used in the underhand tactics are Order Serpentis, Shadow Blades, and Scourge Privateers.
Are Dark Elves.
Yeah, and the ones that you have to deploy in order to get that are your Darkling Covens, Free Guild, and Dwarden. So if you are playing this city and you want to use, exclusively the underhanded tactics, it means you're having no Wanderers, no Phoenix Temple, no Collegiate Arcane, no Devoted of Sigmar, no human side of the Ironworld Arsenal, and no Stormcast, which a normal city would all get access to. So you're right, looking at what you're saying, it pushes you towards a certain area. I think of this city really as being kind of like your old 8th edition fantasy Dark Elves plus some friends in the Dwarden and the Free Guild.
Yeah, so it's effectively like playing a Dark Elf army with some allies because you're going to have very few of those Free Guild and Dwarden units in it.
Yeah.
Like, they are almost going to be 1 in 4, almost, when you're considering what you're taking in underhanded tactics. And we'll get into talking about what units we like in both those roles in a bit. But we'll go into the other thing, and we were talking about Dark Elves doing drugs. So that is Misthaven narcotics. So effectively, these are sort of like once per game use artifacts that you get on top of artifacts, most importantly. And so one hero in a Misthaven army can take a Misthaven narcotic, choose which hero will have the Misthaven narcotic, then pick one or roll. So your normal sort of thing you can do, pick or roll, depending on how you like to do it. You can choose one additional friendly hero to have a narcotic for every War Scroll battalion. You can get into that. And in your hero phase, you can declare a hero with a Misthaven narcotic will use it. So that's important. And metaphoric, so Broken Realms, a time of change. We should go into that as well for the Cities of Sigmar. When you pick a Cities of Sigmar allegiance for your army, you can say it will be from a Broken Realms army. If you do so, you can give it the city keyword from the list below instead of one of the lists in Battletome Cities of Sigmar. If a model already has a city keyword, it cannot get a new one. The army is considered a Cities of Sigmar army and can use the Way of the Free People's trait unless stated otherwise. So what's important about that is Misthaven can take Stormcast, I believe. Misthaven still gets the 1 in 4 rule because it doesn't say it can't. It's Harkonnen that says you can't get the Ways of the Free People. And I think that's something people have been skipping over a lot because everyone looks at Harkonnen and goes, oh, we can't have any of this other stuff. Misthaven still can.
Yeah. Which is really cool. It's nice that it retains the full city rules. Yeah. So it's something that's more familiar for people who've already played cities.
Yeah. So thanks to Metaphoric Dragon for pointing that out, that's a good point. It still gets your general's retinue, your adjutant, your empowered endless spells in Misthaven as well, because that matters a lot in this, considering some of the things that it doesn't get, that you still get empowered endless spells. So I won't go into all of the Misthaven narcotics. There's a whole bunch of one-use abilities, and there's like a bunch of cool ones. There's ethereal, there's like reroll ones of some stuff and all that.
There's just one that I'd like to mention, which is number 4 on the chart, called Float. And it says, when this powder is inhaled, the user floats free from the shackles of gravity and can fly. I just wonder if this was put in as a kind of joke, if, because they're taking narcotics and they're getting high and they're floating away. I wonder if there's a Dark Elf somewhere who just believes he can fly, but isn't actually flying, and is just wandering across the battlefield and somehow gets where he needs to be.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. In Age of Sigmar Soulbound, I look forward to just sending a party to Misthaven now, just to use all these in Age of Sigmar Soulbound. For those who don't know, that's the Warhammer Age of Sigmar role-playing game, effectively Age of Sigmar D&D. But And the other one is Shadow Strike. That is the last one. That's a command ability you get for this free city. So you can use this command ability once per turn after you set up a flanking unit wholly within 12 inch of a friendly Misthaven hero. If you do so, that unit can move d6, but it cannot run. So this is really cool because it allows you to get combat units closer.
Yeah, so this essentially gives your units that have deep struck in 3d6 on their charge.
Essentially. Because for the most part, it is combat units from those three. I mean, Shadow Blades, one of their units does not need to use this ability at all. In being Shadow Warriors, you can effectively take them right out of the equation because they do their own thing anyway. They get no benefit from doing it. I guess the only real shooting unit that's going to come in besides obviously Shadow Warriors is those Scourge Runner chariots.
There's a couple actually that came to mind when I saw this Shadow Strike, other than the chariots, because
actually,
what this does is you come in 9 inches away, and there's a lot of weapons I think that are specifically 9 inches, so that if you teleport, you can't shoot.
I just thought about that.
So if you then get d6 to your move, if you are, let's say, a Hydra with a 9 inch shooting range, you then get in range of shooting, and you have plus d6 to your charge. So you're going to do all kinds of mayhem when you shoot and then charge. Yeah,
I was going to give a shout out to the Blackout Corsairs, but the only thing that really stops them being a unit you want to use them in is it's 10 man. If this was like allowing a 40 man block to get in, that would be amazing. But seeing as it's only 10, I probably would never recommend Blackout Corsairs in either variation using this.
Yeah.
Although combat unit could be all right because they would be packing out 10, 20, 40 attacks if they got the command ability on them.
I think there is still a place for a 10-man unit in this. You know, when I play my Living Cities, I take Shadow Warriors, and they have the same kind of ability. They can come down 9 inches away, and what it does is, you know, it's not just that you think you're going to get them into combat. There might be just a tasty objective that's left free, and there's no enemy unit within 9 inches of it, and you can just come down on top of it, and then you've got bodies on your objective. So, you know, I'm looking at Bleak Swords being like 90 points a unit. And for 90 points, I mean, that's great. And there's also opportunities where, like, for example, your opponent will want to roll over an objective. They want to get off that back lines and get into you. But if you've got, you know, a 90-point unit just sat there, they're not going to come off their back lines because you're just going to take that objective from them as soon as they move. So I think there is still a place for 10-man units.
Metaphoric Dragon also mentioned in the chat. One I really like is Dark Riders, actually. So Dark Riders actually put out 3 shots each with their crossbows instead of 2, which is really cool. And they've got enough damage potential in a decent sized unit of Dark Riders to probably deal with any screening threat because they do become damage too. Yeah, they got no rend. But if opponents just got to throw away 10-man unit on there, probably 10 Dark Riders will probably kill them, or at least do enough damage that then they're going to be -1 to that battle shock because of what Dark Riders battle shock debuff does. That they're actually going to probably get rid of something, plus their movement. If you can get a unit of Dark Riders behind your enemy's line, it becomes a big problem when that unit is movement 14, I believe. Like, they are incredibly fast. That becomes a serious problem for your opponent that they now have to go deal with. Whether or not the Dark Riders achieve anything, making your opponent just come after them is achieving something in itself.
I think Dark Riders are kind of like they're such an underused unit in the game, but I agree with you. I think they're brilliant. I think they really do have their place.
Yeah, because they'll take out most screen or base sort of. Any 5-wound hero is probably dead from a unit of Dark Riders, or just outnumbered. And yeah, that big movement just as soon if you could go down one flank, they literally can zip across your opponent's backline in a turn. Because with a run, they're 20 inches +1 because they got a banner. 21. Like, that's no, and then plus D6 as well. So they could be maximum of 27 inches just jumping across that backboard. Which is nothing to, I guess, shirk about. And I guess we've sort of just jumped straight into this, I guess, talking about units we like to
we've still got command traits and artifacts of power to go.
Yeah, so we'll come back to this, but yeah, Dark Riders was definitely a good shout. out of the comments there. So the command traits, I guess if you want to go through these.
Yep, so command trait number 1 is Shadow Lord. Once per battle round, a general can use the Shadow Strike command ability, which is the one we just spoke about, where you can move a unit d6 without spending a command point. I like this one because anything that saves command points is great in my book.
Yeah, and cities do make use of them. You're going to be wanting using lots of them.
Yeah. Number 2 is Wily Foe. Roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to this general. On a 6, that wound or mortal wound is negated.
Yeah, so it's a proper 6+ DPR, or damage prevention roll. Ward save, as they've started, I guess, calling them out of General's Handbook. It's important. It's against wound and mortal wounds, so that's always good to note. There's plenty that are one or the other.
I think it's fine, or something you want to give a bit of extra survivability to, I think, or something that you want to last longer in combat, put it on your dragon or something like that. I think that's fine. Number 3, I think we need to have a bit of a conversation about number 3.
Yeah, so this is what I was alluding to before.
So this general knows the Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield spells and can attempt to cast one spell in your hero phase in the same manner as a wizard. If this general is already a wizard, they can attempt to cast one extra spell in your hero phase. So,
Misthaven does not have a spell law. That's the biggest thing with this.
It's like they've got the narcotics in place of in the book. You've got all this space on these pages, and where the narcotics are, this is where the spell law should be. I mean, I like the narcotics because there's things about them that are fun and interesting, and they only last a turn, but sometimes it only takes a turn to change the game. Yeah. But I would very gladly sacrifice all of these for a spell law. And also, why are you going to make your general a wizard if there aren't any spells for them to cast? I mean, with no offense to Arcane Bolt, no one wants to cast Arcane Bolt.
I think this comes back to the point, though, that having empowered spells in this one still matters because that's probably what it's getting you to cast. I will say that because you're playing with Darkened Coven's wizards as your predominant wizard, a sorceress, her innate spell, Word of Pain, is amazing, that you probably are happy casting that anyway, plus an endless spell. Because she has a -1 and D3 mortal wound spell. She's got a good spell. It's the only saving grace of this.
It's the empowered spells. I think hopefully with an FAQ coming, they might address it and they might put a spell law in. I mean, that would be a massive FAQ. It'd be a rewrite, really, but fingers crossed. Yeah,
I'd like to see it as well. I mean, it's like I was saying to you before we went live, there's an entire Realm of Shadow lore sitting in Malone sorcery now that's not used, so why not just literally ship that over? That could be an easy way to give them a spell lore. It's got some cool spells in that Shadow one.
And it would fit so well because, this is the city where everything is shrouded in shadows, everything is shrouded in darkness. You don't know what's going to pop up. Even a massive, great big Charybdis is it could be 9 inches away from you. You don't even know. A spell lore like that, like the Law of Shadows, would be perfect in here, and I'd love to see that.
Yeah. And so we got someone asking in the chat when we were seeing FAQs. So for those who don't know and didn't see when they released a article on the Sons of Behemoth, is that we're now getting 4-week turnover of FAQs. Whether or not this will go back is maybe a thing that might happen, but at the moment, because there's really not much happening in the ways of Warhammer in the world, I think it's better that they take this extra time. Maybe when we go back to, GTs every week around the world, we might go back to that 2-week turnover for an FAQ, but at the moment it's a 4-week turnover. So I think we still got a couple of weeks at this point until we get an FAQ.
They like to try and give people a bit of time to play with it, don't they, I think?
And I think at this point, because there's so little, normally, if 2 weeks is normally more than enough time, before lockdown, we were having Age of Sigmar events. You could see stuff on The Honest Wargamer talking about 6 to 12 events in a weekend across the world. And now we're getting a one-dayer on Tabletop Simulator. So
But I was saying to you earlier, Luke, actually, just on that point of there not being so much playing going on, just shout out to everybody in the Australian community. Thank you very much, because you guys playing games and putting them up on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or what have you is really encouraging, and it helps us get our hobby fix for people in countries like I am that are in lockdown. I don't think I'm going to roll a dice until the new year, so thank you very much.
Yeah, that's all well and good. It should say I don't have any Misthaven battle reports up on the channel yet, but if you want to go see a Harkuron one, I did one earlier. There's a Harkuron battle report up on the channel. So I need to get a Misthaven army put together and get one of those up on the channel as well. So the last thing to talk about is artifacts. So I'll go through these as we will. So you have the Gloom Bell. Now, so once per battle at the start of the enemy shooting phase, you can say the bearer will ring the Gloom Bell. If you do so until the end of the phase, subtract 1 from hit rolls that target units wholly within 12 inches of the bearer. That's cool.
This is another one that I've got a bit of an issue with. So yeah. I know I've taken issue with the Shade Warlock, but I've taken issue with the Gloom Bell as well. And I know we're not talking about Harkuron today, but can you just turn the page over and read to me the Traitor's Banner?
Yeah. Traitor's Banner, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made with missile weapons that target friendly units wholly within 12 inches of the bearer.
So it's identical, but you can do it all game long, not just for one turn. So I think there's a bit of blatant favoritism going on. I mean, there's a spell lore over the page, and there's an artifact that's better, and there's a command trait that works.
Yeah, that's better. I think probably Shadow Lord's probably the better of the two, because you're guaranteed to use that command point.
I still think this is a good artifact. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
it's still a good artifact.
It's still a good artifact. It's just, why is there one that's literally the same thing but better?
Especially with the meta at the minute. There's a lot of shooting going on. I especially know because I play Living Cities, but even in Stormcast armies, you will come across a lot of shooting, and being able to get that subtract 1 from hit rolls that target units within 12, will be useful if you think that there's going to be, oh my goodness, I've forgotten their names. Those Stormcast bolt throwers come down at you.
Oh, Celestar Ballistas?
Yeah, 3 Celestar Ballistas you think are going to come down in front of you. This is going to be really key for a turn.
Yeah, or you're playing Kharadron Overlords. This could allow you to get your Shadow Strike in, use it as on the turn so the Kharadron can't shoot and disengage. Because that, for me, I regularly play against probably one of the best Kharadron Overlords players in the world in Mr. Cancron. He is the Kharadron Overlords player that sort of started the whole Kharadron revival when he almost won CanCon with them when apparently they were terrible. Shout out, if you like Kharadron Overlords, go check out his podcast, Aethercast, with a bunch of other cool Kharadron Overlords players. But the thing with Kharadron Overlords, what you do is you generally charge them, you do some damage, but then they shoot everything off that you just charged them with, and you have to do it again. What this could allow you to do is actually have some pieces surviving, holding them in for your second wave to get in. And that goes to the same for a lot of shooting armies that like to shoot and move. You can get in there, pin them in, and then not necessarily survive at full strength again, but get enough of your stuff there that your opponent has to either retreat out of combat if they want to shoot something juicier, or has to shoot what it's in combat with at -1.
Yeah, lots of good uses for the Gloom Bell. I think it is overshadowed by the next artifact, though.
Yeah, the Strangler Kelp Noose. So once per battle, at the start of the combat phase, you can pick one enemy model within 3 inches of the bearer and roll a dice. If the roll is a 6 or is less than the target's wound characteristic, that target cannot attack in the combat phase. So if this is a monster with 6 or more wounds, correct? Model with 6 or more wounds, it can't attack. This is cool. All of a sudden, your dragon charges into, say, a Terrorgeist, and you go, oh, wait, no, charges into a Terrorgeist, that's fine. As long as it charges into, they can't attack.
And actually, speaking of gods and goddesses and things like that, I mean, you can go into Alariel, you can go into Archaon, you can go into Nagash, and you can go, sorry, mate, but you're stuck in seaweed and you're not attacking me this turn.
You don't need to use this on Alariel. She would do nothing. Sorry, I know you love Living City, but yeah. But yeah, jokes aside, yeah, it is a really cool artifact because for me, I like to use the Dreadlord on Black Dragon, which you'll probably see a lot in this army. I think he's a really cool piece and is quite decently powerful. This gives him that extra turn of attacking into something that he will probably kill something he might not have. Those slightly bigger things. If you put a Dreadlord on Black Dragon into a similar 12 wound sort of monster, he's probably going to kill them if he gets to attack first with his buffs up. It's when you starting to need like 14, 15, 16 wounds that he leaves them a little bit alive. And this can allow that Dreadlord to get rid of that other bigger, slightly bigger than him piece and really punch above his weight.
Yeah, it's another turn that you're not going down on the table of taking wounds when you've got that tough matchup. Yeah.
That piece that you just need that extra turn against, this is going to help massively.
But even you might not even take it on your dragon. You might take it on some sort of puny hero that no one thinks anything much of, and then he's got the float narcotic, and all of a sudden he's flown over into this enemy massive monster, and it's actually right. Well, you're not doing anything this turn. You're just stuck.
Yeah, and like that's not anything minor because most of the base heroes that you're going to be using in this, obviously, if you're taking elves, are going to be movement 6. So all of a sudden, like movement 6 and fly, you can get a decent place with them.
And the last one
is Shadow Silk armor. Add 1 to save rolls. So that's decent.
Yeah,
on a Dreadlord, that puts him up to a 2+ save.
Yeah, I think that's really decent. I think all of these are good, if I'm honest.
And probably worth mentioning that there is a different artifact normally than what most people are used to in cities at the moment, in that we get the Realm of Shadow artifact. So the Realm of Shadow artifact is called the Trickster's Foil, and it's reroll wound rolls of 1, which is decent considering a Dreadlord on Black Dragon. I keep talking about him, but he is really going to be the big monster you're probably using. He gets +1 to wound with his command ability, so he can be 2s to wound on a lot of his profiles, and reroll 1s. This only affects his weapon, so it's probably only really good on, say, the lance, but it's another option that you have there, and it's not terrible.
So four like solid options there, I think.
Yeah.
The Strangler Kelp Noose does. I think that's the first one you go to, and then the other ones is situational.
Yeah. Now it does say you can take an extra one with an artifact. There's no, an extra artifact or extra narcotic with a battalion. There are no battalions. Because Drusa Kraith is only for Anvil Guard and Harkeron.
Sorry, I've just flipped back just to read that. I skipped that. I didn't even realize that. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So the only way you're getting an extra narcotic is somehow if you take. The only way I can think of this is taking 2 Stormcast units in a Celestar Ballista and 3 Castigators. That's the only way I can think you're ever going to get a battalion in this army. In taking that Stormcast battalion in the book as allies.
But this is only the first book of the series, so maybe in the next book there'll be a battalion.
We'll keep hope for that. But yeah, that's
or more likely, the FAQ will change Kraith Shadow Host to have.
Or allow giving us a battalion, allowing you to take someone else's battalion. You know, you could easily put the Charwyn Beast Hunters in here. It fits the theme. Allow this to take Charwyn Beast Hunters. Or something like that. But yeah, that's the thing. So I guess we started talking about it before. We're going to go into units that we'll start with units on the table. I think that's a better place to start because they're going to because for starters, they're going to be units that are natural battle line.
Yeah.
Because there are units that are in 8 battle line. Darkling Covens, Free Guild, and Dwarden all have flat battle line units.
Yeah, so for me, when I read Underhand Tactics, I was thinking, okay, so you're putting your battle line on the table and you're saving the underhand tactics for the big nasties that people are going to really worry about coming into their back lines or on their flanks.
Yeah.
So of those, you can have Darkling Covens, Free Guild, or Dwarden, and I think there is a place for Free Guild or Dwarden. Obviously, everyone knows dwarves are tough and hardy, but if you're coming from the realm of Shadow and you want to play this army how it's intended to be played, you're going to take Darkling Covens.
Yeah, and not just that, but Darkling Covens also go really well with your only wizard that fits into any of these as well. Being your sorceress who can sacrifice them to get +2 to cast.
Yeah.
And especially if she's going to be a double caster, if you're going to make her a double caster with Secretive Warlock, to try and get endless spells off and stuff like that, you're going to want to be taking some Darkling Covens. And they're also pretty cheap.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go with the sorceress. I mean, especially one of the narcotics, the Glatchink, is +1 to casting. So then with a sacrifice, you're looking at +3 to casting.
Yeah, you can get off that vital spell. Whether or not that's an endless spell.
It would probably have to be an endless spell, I think.
Yeah, or you just really need a Word of Pain off on something. And that's the cool thing about Word of Pain is that it's always better than Arcane Bolt to try and cast Word of Pain because it's a flat D3.
Yeah. I don't have much more to say about that, really. I was looking at it and I was like, it's just Darkling Covens.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Iron Breakers are a decent shout, I guess. Like, it's probably not as narrative focused, but Iron Breakers are a decent hold the line unit. But Free Guild, I can't really think of any units I'd really want on Free Guild that I can't get better variations of in other things. And Dwarden Iron Breakers are really the only one because Iron Drakes aren't worth it because if the Iron Drakes could ambush, then definitely they'd be worth it, but they can't. So for me, they just don't do the job. I think that's really about it. Yeah,
and the Free Guild stuff that perhaps I would have gone for, I was looking at like potentially a Hurricanum. It's not actually Free Guild, it's Collegiate Arcane.
Yeah, there's human things I'd like, but not necessarily Free Guild. But yeah, for me, it's Darkling Covens. It's also worth mentioning that the Darkling Covens base troops are like 4-up save, which is decent.
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking some of the 4-up save, you can comfortably leave that on your back lines, and that's fine there. And then you have your other stuff coming charging in and go off. Metaphoric Dragon, no great swords. For me, there are equally as good Dark Elf units out there. Your Blackguard and your Execution is probably fulfilling the same role and could potentially be battle line.
And can deploy up the field.
Yeah.
In those units that are starting on the table, I'm not looking for damage dealing units in them. I'm looking for units that are holding. Hence why I mentioned Iron Breakers rather than say Hammerers or Longbeards, because the Iron Breakers can hold a point for me. And probably if you're going to put any Free Guild units, probably Free Guild Guards with swords and shields is probably going to be the Free Guild unit I would use. Agreed. You could go handgunners because of like their ability to shoot, but you're not going to be taking enough handgunners in numbers for them to really matter. I guess the only way you would make, other units viable in that is if you're taking a Soul Screen Bridge to get those shooting units up the board. But then you're really doubling down on pushing into your opponent's territory. Then you're really choosing to play, an aggro sort of game with this if you're doing that. And that's meaning you're definitely taking Shade Warlock and you're definitely taking the narcotic for the +1 to cast. If you're doing that, it's locking you into what you're having to do because you're needing that +3 to cast on the bridge.
But if you have +3 to cast, at least you are, you're pretty much guaranteed to get it.
Yeah. If you're doing that though, you're just locked into those particular things. Because you're having to ensure that all those points spent on doing so are going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So that's really all there is to talk about the units on the table, I think. It's much more interesting on the units that come in, I think. And we talked about Dark Riders a little bit before, so we won't talk about them again because we've already sort of gone through what we think of Dark Riders. Effectively, they're fast, they have a decent amount of shots, and they will take out screens. That's Dark Riders.
Let's talk about the hero of this episode.
Yeah, we're of course talking about the Black Ark Fleetmaster. No, we are not. Although he does have a place. But the Dreadlord on Black Dragon is what we're talking about. He is the best beat stick you can take. Obviously, you could take a Frigil General on Griffin, but he would have to start the game on the table, which isn't as good as being able to deploy up potentially 3 inch away from your enemy.
So the big thing about the Dreadlord on Black Dragon for me is if you read the wording of the command ability, Shadow Strike, is you can use this command ability once per turn after you set up a flanking force wholly within 12 inches of a friendly Misthaven hero. Well, guess who is within 12 inches of a friendly Misthaven hero? It is a Misthaven hero.
Yeah.
So you're never going to be out of range for it. You're not going to deploy down and think, oh, am I not quite within those 12 inches? He's always going to be solidly, reliably able to do that as long as you have a command point. Yeah.
So something important to think about with this, though, is that you can only use this command ability once per turn. So is that, yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't state once per turn for this model. It states once per turn. So I don't know how.
Yeah, but it's only when you set up. So
yeah.
So when you come down, you can use it once, and then you've used it once on that model.
Yeah, yeah. So the Dreadlord, obviously, we've talked about all the artifacts being put on him. Like we've talked about all the ways, I guess, really. There's some cool narcotics that can be used on him as well. You could potentially take, is it Witch Mist? Until your next hero phase, ignore modifiers when making save rolls for attacks that target the user, which is cool. And then, as mentioned, you could have the Shadow Silk armor on him, which means he's a 2-up unrendable save at that point.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. A 2-up unrendable save in your face, 3d6 charge.
And what's cool about the Dreadlord is that dragon's jaw attack never gets lower than d6 damage. And his claws stay at damage 2 all the time. He has a really high potential of damage.
Number 2 on my list was the War Hydra.
Yeah.
The reason for that is when I was looking through the War Scrolls, I noticed that the fiery breath from the War Hydra is a 9-inch range. So if you come down and then move, you're straight away in range, and that's 6 attacks to the fiery breath. 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1. So, it's nothing to be overlooked. I think you could cause a bit of extra damage. In combat, you'd be really happy to have 6 extra attacks like that.
Yeah, it's probably an extra 2 wounds put through, which in the end could be more than enough to see something off. Because what's really cool. You go.
Sorry, I was going to say you're the person to talk about this because you've got the list with all the Hydras in. So if anybody knows how Hydras perform, you're the guy to talk about it.
Yeah, probably not a list of all Hydras. I would not recommend that list. Yeah. But to be fair, like I think it's decent. Like a Hydra will take out your enemy, and if your enemy can't do enough damage to them as well, the Hydra will keep healing up. I had that one of the battle reports I've got on the channel where I played my mate's Gutbusters. They just couldn't do enough to a Hydra to get him down, and so he kept healing, and he stayed around probably an extra 2 turns than what he should have, and it just kept summoning combat. Meanwhile, killing ogres at the same time. So they will do work. I think we'd be remiss without talking about probably the best shooting unit to come in. Now, Shadow Warriors aside, probably the best, because Shadow Warriors will do what Shadow Warriors do in this list regardless. I don't really think there's anything different they do in this. They could potentially get in combat. They've got 2 attacks each.
Move, don't they? That's it.
Yeah. Shadow Warriors don't really do much extra than what you would expect Shadow Warriors to do normally, really, because they can already do this. But for me, the Scourge Runner chariots coming in 9-inch away, making sure, which don't need to come in at 9-inch, can come in at that 16-inch range and fire all their weapons, because they have 12 shots with the crossbows, and then they've got the 6 shots coming out those Ravager harpoons. Really nice.
Yeah, and having those 6 shots kind of pretty much guarantees you that you'll cause some mortal wounds there.
Yeah.
Odds are you will.
Odds are you're guaranteed D3 mortals. And then a lot more damage than that. But yeah, they're decent. And once again, they're also extremely fast. They are 14-inch movers as well. So you can deploy them on the flank of a board, shoot something on the side of your opponent's army, and then run around the side with these massive bases that can actually zone out on a whole objective. What I found with playing with lots of Scourge Runner chariots is that 3 of them is more than enough to cover the frontage of an objective. Because they're on the giant 110 mil bases, they can sit 3 of them long ways across the top of an objective, and now your opponent needs to go around. And your opponent, to try and remove them, your opponent actually has to send something of worth into them, because they are 6 wounds apiece on a 5-up save.
I've never seen anybody use them that way, and I don't know why. I've come up against them. I've not seen that yet. That is, I think that's a great tip.
Yeah, and that does go for both the chariots, like of which we could probably talk about next, because they've got a place, I think, in the Drakespawn chariots. Once again, they're on the 90 mil, so all those tricks I just talked about with the Scourge Runners can apply to Drakespawn, although they are I'm pretty sure they are sufficiently slower. I think they're only about a 10-inch move, if I remember correctly, for the Drakespawn. Which is not slow, but it is sufficiently slower.
I think there is a place at Drakespawn. I was thinking about Drakespawn Knights, because they're good. They're better on the charge, and it kind of guarantee it shores up that you'll get that charge.
Yeah,
they've got charge for their banner anyway. Plus, you've got an extra D6. So if you're looking in there, and 10 of them is they don't have brilliant matchups. So they have good matchups and bad matchups. But in this scenario, you're pretty much guaranteed to get your good matchup.
Yeah, and I think that's like important. That's like we were talking about the Dark Riders before. A lot of people write Dark Riders off as probably one of the worst units in the book. And so, no, Metaphoric Dragon, yeah, with the talking about the Scourge Runners before, we're not looking to charge. You can probably use that D6 movement to actually move rather than charge. You get line up for a charge. You're looking for it to, swing around potentially and get into somewhere you couldn't. But anyway, what's important about this is it allows you to pick your matchup. So units that are otherwise not great can be great, because you can pick a matchup that favors them to be great, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the things so I play Living Cities a lot, and in Living Cities, when you deploy, you come in on the board edge. So it's very easy for your opponent to think, right, they're coming off the board edge, so I'll screen the board edge. I'll have all the stuff that I want to be protected in the middle of the battlefield, and they'll never get to it. But with this, you've got to screen everything. And they can't. It's very difficult to do that with a lot of armies. Not every army has 40 skeletons they can wrap around everything.
Yeah,
you're going to find those nooks and crannies, and then then that's when your units like your Drakespawn Knights are going to really shine.
Yeah, and probably for me, I think so we've talked about literally both units from Orders of Penance. We've talked about Shadowblade. The other unit that can come in is a unit of 10 Scourge Privateers. I probably wouldn't recommend the shooting unit, just because they are 5s to hit at such low numbers. They're going to put out 20 shots, but they're probably not going to do anything at those numbers on 5s and 4s. The combat unit can probably take out most of your opponent's screens, though. If they come in with a Fleet Master, they can potentially be 4 attacks each, and probably do enough damage to clear out a screen. I mean, it's not great, but it's still 10 bodies. And we were talking about this before on how bodies can just matter. If they can get 10 bodies in, they charge your opponent's screen, and all of a sudden your opponent's screen is only 6 models, and they lose a couple, they're still 8. That's the objective captured.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Luke, because like you said, if you come in with a fleet master, so underhand tactics means you can deploy more than one unit down in the same turn, but you can only use the command ability once. So the fleet master will still be in range of everything, and you can still have that unit then move d6 and do what you want.
Yeah. And that's the important thing. They're coming down if you need bodies. I think that's where they come into it. Like your Drake spawn and your and bodies on a smaller frontage. That's in itself can be quite a big thing.
Yeah, that's why I wrote down Bleak Swords. They're the last unit that I had picked, and the reason for that is because they're bodies and they're the cheapest unit you can take.
They can't come down though because they're Dark and Covens.
Oh, you do.
So it literally the same thing you said though, but that's why that is the thing that Scourge Privateers, Black Hat Corsairs give, is that they're bodies on a small frontage. And sometimes that is what you need, because now your opponent can't get to them as easy. You can deploy them on the back of objectives and hide them away a lot easier than, say, 10 bodies of equivalent, which would be Dark Riders or Drakespawn.
And even if they don't come down in the first turn or the second turn, and they come down in the third turn, I think sometimes that's better, because it just makes your opponent have to think a bit more about what they're doing with their backlines, what they're doing with different objectives, what they think they're potentially going to lose if they move off those objectives.
Yeah, and probably the last point, 10 of them at 80 points.
Yeah.
They're cheap, really cheap. So even with a character, they are 140 points. Even if you're doing that combo with the character, that's 140 points, which is also a character with them, which in some scenarios could be really good. It's a cheap way in, say, places of arcane power or a heroes joining scenario, where you can drop them, screen out, and then put a character, and they can go on the objective.
I think that pretty much covers everything in there. So what are your overall thoughts, Luke?
It's definitely not the strongest city. There's no doubt about it. It is definitely probably not up there with Hallowheart and Tempest Eye. Is probably what I do think. While I like Living City and Anvilgard more, Anvilgard and Living City are probably in the middle somewhere. I guess the two that people go to at the moment are Hallowheart and Tempest Eye are people seeing as the strongest. Some potential lists in Hammerhall as well. But I definitely think this is better than what a lot of people have given it credit for. Yes, it is missing things in the spell lore and stuff. But I do think it's decent enough that this could see you go 3-2, 4-1 at a tournament if you play this well.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it's got things in it that will shine. It's got matchups that are really good. I mean, it hates total commitment. Absolutely hates total commitment.
Yeah, but any TO that throws that into a tournament pack, I'm probably not going with this. Like people talk about total commitment. I go off on a little tangent here. People talk about, it hurts Stormcast. It's like, well, if you're not in the tournament pack, don't take Stormcast. Like with my Dark Elf army, if I saw total commitment come up, I'd just go take Hakuran or Anvilgard.
Yeah. For me, I really like the lore of it. I like the idea of the narcotics. I like the idea that it is really shadowy and there's loads of stuff hiding in the shadows that can come out. I like that it's like your old Dark Elf force, because I know there's a lot of people who want to see a unified Dark Elf army.
Yeah, for me, it does what Living City has done for you. So I don't know. Did you used to play Wood Elves in Fantasy as well?
I've played Wood Elves for over 20 years.
Cool. So I am an old Wood Elf player. It's funnily enough, Dark Elves are actually only a thing for me since Age of Sigmar. Wood Elves were my thing back in Fantasy. So for me, what Living City did is that it gave me finally being able to take my Wood Elf army together again. Take Wanderers and take Sylvaneth. That was enough to sell me on Living City. The rules could have been terrible, but that sold me on them.
Yeah, so I think in summary for me, let's have a think what I want to say about it. I think compared to Living Cities, it does have an edge because it can't be screened out as easily, and you can really do that kind of. You can be precise. You can be like a scalpel with where you put your units and what you want to hit.
Yeah.
The plus 1d6 to your move is really good. I don't think it's quite. I don't think it's quite as good as a Living City one, because in Living Cities you can move a full move after you shoot. So if you're a shooting unit, you get a full move after, and you can do that every single turn with a command point. Whereas with this, it's only the turn you come down. It's really about coming down and either maneuvering around where you want to be on your objective, as you said with the Scourge and Chariots, or making sure you get that charge with your Black Dragon. But I think, would I trade it? I think if I knew that I could have a Black Dragon anywhere I wanted on the battlefield, I probably would trade it from being in on the board edge.
Yeah, I think too, like this benefits different units without a doubt. Because the thing you're looking for in Living City is you're looking for a unit that can shoot and is good in combat. So Durthu, Dracoths, Stardrake, etc. In this, you're not worried about the shooting. You can go for a unit like the Black Dragon that is just all combat potential. Although, no, because he can't get within 6. Don't worry. That's sad, because he can never get within 6 inch. Oh, wait, no, he can. Yeah, no, he can. Yeah. He can get... So if you roll high enough on that Black Dragon, he can get where that noxious breath all of a sudden becomes a thing too. We didn't talk about that. So you need to roll at least like a 4, or you realistically, if you roll that 6, he's getting some mortal wounds on someone too.
And the other thing, I think this has got a place. I think it shines in smaller games. So if you're playing an 1,000-point game, say, and you're still playing a scenario where there's 6 objectives, well, I was in a 1,000-point tournament before we went into lockdown, and if you're playing against people who are like ogre players, they might only have 3 units and there's 6 objectives, and you've got stuff that they've got their objectives, and you think, well, I'm never going to go up against that Stonehorn, but you can just drop something down on all the other ones.
Yeah. Once again, like, hate spooking my own chat, but there's a cool battle report where I was playing the Gargants with my Order Serpentis, and that literally was how I won the game. And the Gargants came and they smashed everything. I didn't kill a single one of them. However, I just had these spare units at low point games, which Cities does really well at just giving you spare units, especially at low points, which is where those Blackout Corsairs can really come into it.
But you could. Yeah, I mean, you could open your turn 2, and then you're like, right, 3 units are coming down, and they're coming down on 3 objectives.
Yeah, and that's certainly a thing. Like, I don't think there's enough talk about like playing. Everyone talks about playing 2,000-point games, but half the games I play aren't 2,000 points.
So yeah, I think it will have tougher matchups in bigger games. In smaller games, you're really going to be able to exploit all those shadow shenanigans and stuff like that. And also, I think the noose is going to be really fun, getting stuff trapped in seaweed. Yeah,
I definitely want to hear about. I should have my Twitter handle up here, but I don't. So mine is @DadhammerNeo. Yeah, if you ever manage to get something in a noose after watching this, I want to hear what people get things in a noose. I'd love to hear about people's noose stories on how you throw some seaweed at Archaon and he can't do anything. Yeah, like, that's going to be amazing. It's almost like the thing for Envergard where you love hearing about everyone's tale about vitriolic spray. What they managed to get that off on, and then mince this unit that's apparently impenetrable in one turn. But yeah, so I guess we've talked enough about Misthaven. We'll talk a little bit now, I guess, about what do you want to see from Broken Realms going forward. We'll talk a little bit about this, and then we'll probably wrap it up.
How far into spoilers are we going? Are we full spoilers?
Right. Yeah, so right. Warning now, full spoilers. There is no holding back from this point. If you have not read the narrative and do not want everything spoiled, I can't promise what we will not give away in this section going forward. So you have 1, 2, 3, spoiler time. Let's go. If you're still here, it's your own fault.
Chaos baby, chaos baby.
So I'm going to point out something cool about that Chaos baby. Everyone's talking about this Slaanesh baby. I've been reading the Warcry. Now, have you kept up with the Warcry story?
I have played one game of Warcry to my shame. There's a chap in our group, Narrative Chris, who is all over it and really wants us to get into it. But I have not been keeping up anything that's outside of the Morathi book.
Oh, so Catacombs has some really interesting narrative, and especially the novel delving into the lore. Archaon has a child. I want to see more of this. Like, everyone's talking Slanesh baby, and I'm like, the greatest warrior in all the mortal realms, Archaon, has a child. Like, I want to know more about this. This seems like something that could be massive.
Yeah, and I want to know now as well. Now I've started reading this. I want to know more about the 8 points. It's so fascinating a setting.
Yeah,
draw me in as well.
Just reading the Warcry novels and all that. I should have a review up on Catacombs novels soon as well. But the Warcry novels are really great in showing off different parts of the 8 points and just showing life in there. I like that we're getting to see chaos and like people live there. It's just a normal life to them, and like it's not all evil too. There's parts of the 8 points where there's farmers that farm normal crops, normal animals, and live a normal life. That farmers that trade with each other, they just worship the chaos gods. Like, yeah, that's cool.
I think that's part of that was really missing. And shout out to the Two Piece podcast, because Ben on there was always going on about when Age of Sigmar first arrived, there was no normal farmers and normal people. It was all like Stormcast fighting chaos and all this sort of stuff going on. And there was, before the Cities book happened, really, there wasn't any normality. Everyone was just at war, and that was all that was going on.
Yeah, and I think like we can look back on stuff like that now and go, okay, I get why we had the Realm Gate Wars. They make sense now looking past, but I can get why people weren't enthused about them at the time.
I think the stuff like you said about the normal people living in the 8 points, it just gives you that perspective. I mean, a bloodthirster doesn't look massive and scary until it's stood in front of a peasant farmer. And then you think, oh my goodness.
I mean, and that's why people love cities. Cities are the generic people of the mortal realms fighting against all the terrible things. That's what's cool about cities to me.
Yeah, and me as well.
It's like playing the human in Dungeons and Dragons.
There are free guild guard that don't even have shoes, and they've got to go up against all the nasties of the realms.
Yeah. So, all right. Last question, I guess, before we go. Like, we're talking about like what we'd like to see in Broken Realms. If you could pick, all right. So we don't know how many books there are going to be, but if you could pick another 4 books for the series, and they're named after characters, what would they be?
Ooh.
4 names.
Okay. I know what I'm building up to. I know the last name that I would like. Okay, so let's see who I would like. I think I would like Alariel, but yeah. I would secretly like that book to be about Orion.
Yeah, or Kurnoth is he most likely. Yeah.
So it can be called Alariel, and I'd like to see that explored, that avenue explored, because we've got the Kurnoth warband that were released, but we haven't really heard anything else from them. So I would like to, if I could see anything explored, it would be that.
Yeah.
I think Nagash still has a part to play.
Yeah, whether it's Nagash or I guess one of his minions.
Yeah.
Do we finally see like Manfred betray him again?
You know, this is all going on, all this stuff, but the backdrop at the moment is still the Soul Wars. And if we're going to get to some kind of conclusion of that for the next edition, then we have to see what is going on in the Soul Wars and how that ends. So I want to see what's going on with that. The third one, if I could choose, is definitely Malarian.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I think everyone wants that.
You know, especially with his relationship with Morathi, I think, you know, we want, and everything going on in the Realm of Shadows, we want to see Malarian. There is a bit, this is another spoiler alert, but there is a bit where Morathi is laying siege to Anvilgard, and there are still some Stormcast in there, but she manages to stop them from going to Azir and warning Sigmar. But as sort of a dark, shadowy winged beast collects one and sends one back to Sigmar. And people are saying that might be Malaria, not really happy with what his mum's up to.
Yeah, so that was my thing on that. Everyone seems to think that like Malarian might be this one to betray Sigmar. I think it would be cool if Malarian is actually the one guy who sticks by Sigmar, because Teclis isn't. We already know Teclis has got his own plans. He's doing his own thing. Alariel is very recluse as a character, and which I like about her. Like, I like that she's this reclusive sort of like, I guess, almost hippie. Like, she's like that person who lives in the woods by herself, and like I like that about her. That's a cool aspect to like a god, that like a reclusive god is a cool thing, especially since she's like the god of life. And well, if you're getting an Alariel book, you're going to have Nurgle in that, because that war is still raging on massively. But the Malarian one would be cool to see if he's actually the one that sticks by Sigmar.
Yeah, that would be a really good twist, and then that would pit those two against each other really well.
Because you got to remember, the last war in the end times, Malarian and Malekith were like directly opposed.
And also, Malarian and Morathi, they've got a very they've got a very complicated relationship in the old world. I don't want to go too much into it.
Yeah. We'll say go do some reading up on that. For me, I guess you mentioned like I would really like to see Alariel, because I want to see Kernothi. Like, I'm a Wood Elf player just like you. I want to see Kernothi. I think Slaanesh is definitely a book that's possible.
Yeah.
Like, all things considered on what's happened at the end of this, I think Slaanesh is definitely a book that's possible. I think with the reveal show we had last night, we sort of know where that's going, so probably don't need to go into any more than that. For me, I wouldn't mind seeing Thanquol. Give Skaven a place in the Mortal Realms finally. Give them a major storyline. The most we've had was we had Clan Slink stop Nagash once again. But I don't think they've really had this massive place. And we know Thanquol is alive and well. If you've read the Gotrek books, he knows Thanquol's around. The Greyseer has it out for Gotrek. And the Greyseer obviously is Thanquol. Gotrek is his arch nemesis, even though Gotrek doesn't know it. Or didn't anyway.
That would be great. That would tie into the narrative really well, because we all know what lies in the sewers underneath the city. So underneath Harkiron, there could just be millions and millions of rats just waiting to come up and swarm the city.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any city that's probably infested, it would have been Anvilgard. Like, it would be those corrupt cities where they don't have order, that Skaven go, you're an easy target.
Yeah, that's a great shout.
And I guess probably the only other one is I'd like to actually see. So I have this thought. I'd like to see a Gorka Morka one, but I don't want to see Gorka Morka in it. I want to see the aspect of Gork and the aspect of Mork in what I want to see. Godrak is definitely Gork, because he's fighty but a little bit cunning, and Scragrot as Mork, cunning but a little bit fighty.
Like incarnates of.
Yeah, so the two aspects of Gorka Morka, in that you have Scragrot is the cunning part, Godrak is the thing, and have this amalgamation of destruction. I think would be cool.
What's great is that, like we said in the beginning, it can just go anywhere.
Yeah.
So much to do with it.
Yeah. But anyway, I think we're going to wrap up. It's early in the morning and I've got to start going and look after babies. And it's late at night for you, two very different times. You've got beer, I have coffee. But so thank you so much for coming on and having a chat about Misthaven, man. We've been trying to get this happening for a little while, and finally we get to do one of these together, which is great.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure. It's great to chat Warhammer with you. Thank you to everyone in the chat who joined in.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who watches this later. Please don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, all that jazz. I'll leave down in the description as well. There's a link to the Discord server. You can chat with me and other members of the community that we've got at Sinful Gaming. And a shout out to everyone who supports the channel via Patreon as well. You're all greatly appreciated in supporting the channel, allowing us to fund stuff like the streaming software and all that we use. And if you'd like to help do such a thing, you can find a link to the Patreon down in the Discord as well. But I think that's it for now. So stay safe, everyone. Stay well. And most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. I'll see you all again real soon.